The Summit, a Michelin-starred restaurant perched in the heart of New York City, was an institution revered by culinary elites. Its gleaming facade, adorned with intricate designs and golden accents, was a beacon for the wealthy and influential. Stepping inside, one would find a dining room that exuded sophistication, soft lighting, fine china, and the gentle murmur of exclusive clientele savoring their meals. But behind this veil of perfection lay a very different world, a kitchen where the heat didn't just come from the stoves. Chef David Carter, the maestro behind the Summit's acclaim, was a figure of duality. At 45, he was at the zenith of his career, a culinary genius whose name was synonymous with artistry and innovation. His salt and pepper hair and piercing blue eyes gave him an air of authority that commanded attention. But beneath his poised exterior lay a volatile temperament that churned like a boiling pot left unattended. The kitchen was David's kingdom, and he ruled it with an iron fist. To his team, he was both a source of inspiration and a figure of dread. His mastery of flavors and textures was undeniable, but his temper could scorch even the most seasoned chefs. Praise was as rare as a truffle in the wild, and criticism was served in heaping portions. "Do you call this seared?" he bellowed one evening, holding up a plate of scallops arranged in an elegant spiral. To the untrained eye, it was flawless. To David, it was an insult to his vision. Without warning, he tipped the plate, sending the delicate scallops tumbling to the floor. The young line cook, Alex, froze, his face a mix of shock and fear. "I'm sorry, chef," he stammered. "I'll redo it right away." David's eyes narrowed as he stepped closer, his voice a low growl. "Sorry, that's your answer. Sorry doesn't fix incompetence. If you can't handle the basics, perhaps you're better suited to flipping burgers." The kitchen fell silent, the other cooks pretending to be engrossed in their work. Everyone knew better than to intervene. For them, this was just another night under David's tyrannical reign. David's wrath extended beyond the line cooks. Sarah, a gentle and efficient waitress in her late 20s, was often caught in the crossfire. Her kind brown eyes betrayed the resilience she maintained in the face of daily chaos. One evening, she cautiously approached the pass to relay a customer's query. "Chef," she began softly, "the Carmichaels are asking about their order." "They?" David whirled around, his expression thunderous. "Do I look like I care what the Carmichaels want right now?" he snapped. "Get out of my kitchen and let me do my job." Sarah flinched but retreated without a word. Her cheeks burned with humiliation as she returned to the dining room. Behind the scenes, whispers of discontent grew louder. Line cooks spoke in hushed tones about leaving. Waitstaff confided in one another about their frustrations. And the dishwashers, often the targets of David's scorn, fought to keep up with the relentless demands. By the time the last customer left each evening, the staff were more than just physically exhausted, they were emotionally drained. The kitchen was a pressure cooker, its seams straining under the weight of David's ego and the mounting resentment of his team. But it wasn't just the staff who noticed the cracks. Even the customers, though sheltered from the kitchen's turmoil, began to sense something amiss. "The food was divine," one regular commented to their companion. "But did you notice how tense everyone seemed tonight?" "Yes," the other agreed, frowning. "It's as if the sparkle is missing. I wonder if something's wrong." For David, perfection was not just a goal, it was a necessity, an obsession that consumed him. But what he failed to realize was that his pursuit of perfection was fracturing the very foundation of his restaurant. One evening, after an especially grueling service, Sarah lingered in the dining room, her hands mechanically clearing tables. Alex's dejected face haunted her thoughts. How many more talented people would David break before someone put a stop to it? She bit her lip, debating whether she should say something. To whom? She didn't know. Upstairs, in the office of the restaurant's CEO, an email pinged onto the screen. Matthew Johnson, the man who had inherited the Summit from his late father. Read the anonymous note with growing concern. It detailed the toxic atmosphere in the kitchen, the fear that permeated the staff, and the unchecked behavior of Chef David. Matthew leaned back in his chair, his mind racing. The summit wasn't just a business, it was his father's legacy. A place built on passion, teamwork, and respect. If these allegations were true, it meant everything his father had worked for was at risk. That night, Matthew called his mother, Eleanor Johnson, a former restaurateur herself. Eleanor was a woman of quiet strength and wisdom. "Mom," he said, his voice heavy with worry, "I need your help. The summit is in trouble." And so, the winds of change began to stir. Eleanor's journey was about to begin. Though no one, not even Matthew, could predict the impact she would have. The summit was on the cusp of transformation, and its story was only just beginning. The next morning, Eleanor Johnson arrived at the summit before the city had fully woken. The restaurant's imposing facade, framed by the soft glow of dawn, stood as a testament to its prestige. To passers-by, she appeared to be just another early worker, a woman with silver hair tied neatly back. Wearing simple but practical clothing, her warm brown eyes scanned the exterior as she straightened her posture, exuding a quiet dignity that belied her unassuming role. Inside, Eleanor was greeted by Thomas, the restaurant's young maître d'. His polished demeanor faltered when he realized she wasn't a customer. "I'm sorry, but we're not open yet," he said politely, glancing at the door as though to redirect her outside. Eleanor offered him a serene smile. "I'm here for the dishwasher position. I believe I'm expected." Thomas blinked, clearly startled. "Oh, right. Let me get Chef David for you." He disappeared through the kitchen doors, leaving Eleanor alone in the meticulously arranged dining room. The summit's reputation for precision and elegance extended even to its empty tables. Crystal glasses sparkled under the soft lighting, and the scent of freshly polished wood filled the air. Yet, Eleanor couldn't ignore the subtle tension that lingered, as though the walls themselves held the weight of the kitchen's strife. Moments later, the kitchen doors swung open, and Chef David entered. His presence was commanding, his sharp eyes immediately appraising Eleanor. He seemed caught between disbelief and disdain. "You're here for the dishwasher position?" he asked, his tone dripping with skepticism. Eleanor met his gaze evenly. "That's right. I may be older, but I assure you, I'm more than capable." David's lips curled into a smirk. "We'll see about that. Follow me." As Eleanor trailed him through the bustling kitchen, she took in her surroundings. Stainless steel surfaces gleamed under the fluorescent lights, and the air buzzed with the sounds of pots clanging and orders being called. It was a world she knew well, though it had been years since she'd worked in one. David stopped at the dishwashing station and gestured dismissively. "This is your domain. Every plate, every pot, every utensil, spotless. We have a reputation to maintain, and that starts here. Can you handle it?" Eleanor nodded calmly. "I can, chef. Every job, no matter how small, contributes to the success of the whole operation." David studied her for a moment, as if searching for sarcasm, but her expression remained earnest. He finally turned on his heel. "Good. Thomas will get you set up. Don't expect special treatment because of your age. Everyone pulls their weight here." "Understood," Eleanor replied, her voice steady. As she settled into her role, Eleanor's movements were deliberate and efficient. Her hands worked with a practiced ease, scrubbing and drying without complaint. Beneath her quiet exterior, however, her sharp mind observed everything: the strained faces of the staff, the fear in their voices when David was near, and the hushed conversations carried out only when they were sure he wasn't listening. Eleanor understood that this mission would test not only her physical endurance but also her patience and resolve. The summit's kitchen was a battlefield, and though she wielded nothing more than a sponge and quiet strength, she was ready to take on the fight. Eleanor quickly became a fixture in the kitchen. her presence quiet yet unwavering. Every morning, she arrived before the other staff, meticulously preparing her station for the day ahead. Though she rarely spoke unless spoken to, her demeanor carried an air of calmness that began to ripple subtly through the chaotic environment. But the kitchen was far from harmonious. Chef David's temper flared as consistently as the burners on the stoves. Every misstep, no matter how small, was met with sharp criticism. "This is supposed to be julienne," he barked at a prep cook one afternoon, holding up a pile of unevenly cut vegetables. "Did you learn this at kindergarten? Fix it." The young cook nodded hurriedly, her hands trembling as she reached for the knife. Eleanor, standing nearby, watched the scene unfold with a pang of sympathy. She remembered kitchens from her past, high pressure. Yes, but never this hostile. She noted how the staff worked tirelessly, their eyes darting nervously whenever David entered the room. Eleanor's own interactions with David were no exception to his tirades. One evening, as the team prepared for a high-profile charity event, David stormed over to her station, a plate in hand. "What is this?" he demanded, holding up a plate with a faint watermark on its edge. "You call this clean? Are you even paying attention?" Eleanor remained calm, taking the plate from him and examining it closely. "I apologize, Chef," she said, her tone steady. "I'll rewash it immediately." David leaned in, his voice dropping to a venomous hiss. "If you can't handle something as simple as washing dishes, maybe it's time to retire. We don't have room for incompetence here." The kitchen fell silent, all eyes darting between Eleanor and David. But Eleanor simply nodded, her expression unruffled. "Understood, Chef," she replied, turning back to her sink. As David stalked off, the tension in the kitchen seemed to thicken. But Eleanor's poise didn't falter. Her calm response to his harsh words didn't go unnoticed. Sarah, the waitress who often bore the brunt of David's outbursts, found herself gravitating toward Eleanor during breaks. "You're amazing," Sarah whispered one afternoon, glancing around to ensure David wasn't nearby. "I don't know how you stay so calm." Eleanor gave her a gentle smile. "It's not always easy, dear. But I've learned that reacting with anger only feeds the fire. Patience can be a powerful tool." Sarah nodded, a flicker of hope in her eyes. "We need someone like you here," she murmured. Over the following days, Eleanor noticed a subtle shift in the staff. Acts of quiet solidarity began to emerge, a cook slipping her a cup of tea during a rare lull, Sarah helping her carry heavy stacks of plates. It was as though her resilience had reminded them of their own strength, planting the seeds of change. But Eleanor knew the road ahead was long. David's behavior wasn't just a personal flaw, it had become ingrained in the culture of the kitchen. To truly transform the summit, she would need more than patience. She would need a plan. And she would need to act soon. The turning point came on a night when the tension in the kitchen reached its peak. The summit was hosting a high-profile charity event, with food critics and influential guests filling the dining room. Chef David, already under immense pressure, was in rare form. His voice echoed through the kitchen, a relentless stream of criticism and threats. "If any of you mess this up," he snarled, pacing between stations, "you'll be out of a job before the night's over. Do I make myself clear?" The staff nodded silently, their faces masks of concentration tinged with fear. Even the most seasoned cooks seemed hesitant, their usual rhythm disrupted by David's overbearing presence. The breaking point came during dessert service. David inspected the pastry chef's intricate sugarwork with a scowl. "This is sloppy," he declared, jabbing a finger at the delicate decorations. "Do it again. And if it's not perfect, you're out." When the pastry chef hesitated, attempting to explain the intentional imperfections in the design, David's fury boiled over. With a sweep of his arm, he sent the carefully plated desserts crashing to the floor. The kitchen froze, the sound of shattering porcelain reverberating in the silence. "Amateurs," David bellowed, his face red with rage. "You're all incompetent." It was at that moment that Eleanor stepped forward, setting down the dish she had been drying. She spoke with a calm but firm voice that cut through the tension. "Chef David," she said, her tone steady, "this isn't helping anyone." David turned on her, his fury now directed squarely at Eleanor. "And what would you know about running a kitchen? You're just a dishwasher. You have no idea what it takes to maintain these standards." Eleanor met his gaze without flinching. "I know that fear doesn't bring out the best in people, Chef. Respect does." The staff watched in stunned silence, their eyes darting between Eleanor and David. Before he could respond, the dining room doors swung open, and Matthew Johnson stepped inside. The CEO's presence commanded immediate attention, his tailored suit and composed expression contrasting sharply with the chaos of the kitchen. "Chef David," Matthew said, his voice calm but resolute. "We need to talk." David's bravado faltered as he realized who was addressing him. He opened his mouth to speak, but Matthew cut him off with a firm gesture. "Now." As Matthew led David to his office, Eleanor noticed the shift in the room. The staff, still reeling from the confrontation, exchanged cautious glances. A sense of relief began to replace the fear, though no one dared voice it aloud. In the office, Matthew wasted no time. "David," he began, his tone measured but laced with disappointment, "this ends now. Your behavior is unacceptable. And it's not just affecting the staff, it's tarnishing the reputation of the summit. My father built this restaurant on respect and teamwork. I won't let you destroy that legacy." David, caught off guard, stammered in response. But Matthew was unrelenting. "You'll be stepping down for now," he continued. "We'll discuss what happens next. But things are going to change. Starting tonight." Back in the kitchen, Eleanor returned to her station, quietly resuming her work. She knew this was only the beginning, but for the first time, she felt that change was truly possible. The kitchen was unusually quiet the following day. The absence of Chef David's booming voice and sharp critiques created an eerie stillness. The staff, still processing the events of the previous night, exchanged hushed whispers as they prepared for another evening of service. Eleanor arrived as she always did, her calm presence grounding the team in the midst of uncertainty. But today, the air felt different, lighter, though tinged with apprehension. Everyone knew that Matthew Johnson had confronted David, but no one knew what would happen next. Shortly before the pre-service briefing, the dining room doors opened, and Matthew entered, followed closely by David. The staff instinctively straightened, their gazes flickering between the CEO's composed expression and the chef's subdued demeanor. Matthew began, his voice steady. "Before we start today, I want to address what happened last night. The events you witnessed were unacceptable, and I take full responsibility for allowing this culture to persist. It ends now." He paused, letting his words sink in, before continuing. "Chef David has something he'd like to say." David stepped forward, his usual commanding presence replaced by visible unease. He looked at the staff, his piercing blue eyes softened by a rare vulnerability. "I owe all of you an apology," he began, his voice quieter than anyone had ever heard it. He hesitated, taking a deep breath. "I've let my temper and my ego get the better of me. I convinced myself that pushing you to the breaking point was the only way to maintain our standards. But I see now that I was wrong. I've hurt you individually and as a team, and I've damaged the spirit of this kitchen." The staff exchanged uncertain glances, their expressions a mixture of skepticism and cautious hope. David's words felt genuine, but they were a stark contrast to the man they had endured for so long. "I don't expect forgiveness," David continued, his gaze earnest. "I know I have a lot to make up for, but I want to make things right. I want to be the kind of leader who inspires, not intimidates." Eleanor watched as the staff absorbed his apology. Sarah, the waitress who had often been the target of his ire, was the first to speak. Her voice was soft but firm. "Chef, it's not easy to forget everything that's happened. But if you're serious about changing, I think we can try to move forward." Murmurs of agreement rippled through the group. It wasn't forgiveness, not yet, but it was a beginning. Matthew stepped back in, addressing the room. "David will be taking a leave of absence to work on his leadership skills and reflect on how he can contribute positively to this team. In the meantime, we'll be making changes to ensure this kitchen becomes a place where respect and collaboration thrive." The staff nodded, a tentative optimism lighting their faces. As the team returned to their stations, Eleanor felt a flicker of pride. The summit's transformation was far from complete. But for the first time, she believed it was truly possible. The seeds of change had been planted. Now, it was time to nurture them. The days that followed marked the beginning of a transformation at the summit. Without Chef David's dominating presence, the atmosphere in the kitchen began to shift. The tension that had long hung over the team like a dark cloud started to lift, replaced by a cautious sense of possibility. Eleanor observed the changes with a quiet satisfaction. She continued her work at the dishwashing station, her movements steady and efficient. Though she now carried the respect of the entire staff, she maintained her unassuming demeanor, blending seamlessly into the rhythm of the kitchen. Matthew was true to his word. Within days, he brought in guest chefs, culinary innovators who introduced new techniques and perspectives. These professionals not only mentored the staff but also encouraged them to share their ideas, creating an atmosphere of collaboration and creativity that had been absent for so long. Sarah, once hesitant to speak up, began to find her voice. She proposed adjustments to the menu based on customer feedback, and her suggestions were met with enthusiasm. The line cooks, freed from the constant fear of reprimand, began experimenting with flavors and presentation, rediscovering the joy of their craft. Eleanor watched with pride as the team began to flourish. "This is what my husband dreamed of," she thought, recalling the days when the summit was a place where passion and teamwork thrived. One evening, after a particularly successful service, Matthew gathered the staff in the dining room. The tables, usually set for guests, were laden with dishes the team had prepared together, a celebration of their shared effort. Matthew raised a glass, his expression warm. "I want to thank each of you for your resilience and your dedication," he said. "What we're building here isn't just about food. It's about creating a place where people feel valued, where creativity can thrive. That's the legacy my father wanted. And with your help, we're making it a reality." The staff cheered, clinking their glasses together. Eleanor sat quietly at the edge of the room, a soft smile on her face. She was content to observe, knowing she had played her part in setting this change in motion. Later that night, as the staff cleared away the remnants of their celebration, David entered the kitchen. His leave of absence had ended, and he looked like a man who had faced his own demons. His once brash demeanor was subdued, replaced by a humility that seemed genuine. He approached Eleanor, who was stacking plates with her usual precision. "Grace, Mrs. Johnson," he began, catching himself. "Eleanor, I don't think I can ever truly express how sorry I am for the way I treated you and everyone else." Eleanor turned to him, her expression kind but firm. "Apologies are a start, David. But actions matter more. If you're serious about change, you have a chance to prove it, not to me, but to them." She gestured toward the staff bustling around the kitchen. David nodded solemnly. "I will. I promise." As the night wound down, Eleanor hung up her apron for the last time. Her mission was complete, but she knew her influence would linger in the culture she had helped rebuild. Walking out into the cool night air, Eleanor felt a deep sense of peace. The summit was no longer just a restaurant, it was a family, one bound by respect, creativity, and the shared pursuit of excellence. And she had no doubt that its finest days were still ahead.